Welcome back to Let's Talk Kashrus. We are joined today by Rabbi Shalom Fishbein, Kashrus Administrator of the Chicago Rabbinical Council and Executive Director of ACO, the Association of Kashrus Organizations. Thank you, Rabbi Fishbein, once again.
Thank you, Rabbi Yitzchak.
We're here today to discuss something that's Omer ala Perek, something that's very relevant now with the Yom Tov of Pesach, and that is chometz she'avar alav haPesach. And the most relevant topic, which I think most people grapple with every single year, is buying chometz post-Pesach.
Right.
What am I allowed to buy? Where am I allowed to buy? What's the answer?
Well, I wish there was a short answer, because every year it changes. And as we are pre-Pesach at this moment, we're in the midst of doing the research for this year. And we're proud about something called an ACO post-Pesach committee. The chairman of that committee is Rabbi Yaakov Luban from the OU. And there's various members. And what we do with that committee is we look at the national chains and the national distributors and try to figure out, A, if they're Jewish-owned, wholly Jewish-owned. Then we get into, let's say it's partially Jewish-owned, but the decision makers are Jewish. All of these obviously have huge ramifications in halacha. Mm-hmm. And then we look at the practical. And I'm going to interrupt you for a moment. Before we even get into the stores and distributors, perhaps there are viewers here who are watching our conversation who are not familiar. Chometz she'avar alav haPesach. That's chometz that was in the possession of a Jew over Pesach, right? So
which is forbidden to be eaten,
forbidden
right?
To be eaten. It's Gzeir D'Rabbanan, and it's a Gzeir D'Rabbanan that the Rabbanan were very strong about. It was a shmira to make sure that there was that Pesach, which is Karis, obviously chometz from Pesach is Karis. So the Chachamim put into this that if you do have it and you didn't take care of it, it's usher. It's usher to eat. You can't do it afterwards. And I have to tell you a story. This is many, many years ago. I'm talking maybe 12 years ago. We were invited into a factory who wanted to. It was a large bourbon factory, and they made other spirits. They had a client in Israel for vodka. They asked us to come in and say. They said to us, come in and certify us for Israel. What was the pride? Is interesting, because in Eretz Yisrael the Rabbanut is machmer on yoshan. So was the wheat or whatever was being used to make the vodka yoshan? That was really what we were focused on. And I remember we went through it. It was a typical factory, typical at least for those in kashrus that go to these factories. But for everyone else, it's fascinating. Mm-hmm. Okay, for us, it's work. We don't get to do the tour part of the distillery. And I remember, I was getting up from my seat. I said, "Oh, I forgot to ask you." I sit back down, say, "By the way, is this Jewish owned?" Mm-hmm. And he looks at me. Yeah. I said, "Do you know if the owners, is it fully Jewish owned?" And he got like, "Well, I can't tell you that." And I said, "Do you know if he sold his chometz?" He had no idea what I was talking about. It took 6 months to research if he was really Jewish, not just maybe from his father or culturally Jewish, but really Jewish. We had to call like senators, because he was a big guy and a very well-known person in government, whatnot. So we had to call various high-level people that knew him as a boy, whatnot. And we had to do we had to see, is it wholly Jewish owned? Is he really Jewish? And come to the conclusion that that it was a problem. And for a while, they thought we were talking about mevushal, because they knew that when they donated product to the local federation, it always had to be mevushal. No, we're not. This halacha chometz of Pesach was so foreign to them. But Rabbi, it was cooked. Like no. Anyway, so it was a fascinating question. Halacha question. I know this. The guys in my office know it. Some of the Rabbanim we spoke to know about it. but the vast majority doesn't know it. So Rabbi Yitzchak, let me ask you, if I know that this is chometz of haPesach, and the Chazal made a gzeira on it, so that you, the owner, should be careful about Hilchos Pesach, but that's for you. Do I have to tell everybody? In Brisker, is it a din in the Gav or is it a din in the Chefset? That was the question. And one of the things ACO has is what we call an ACO Bezdin. We have an ACO Bezdin. Where it doesn't meet often, but when it does meet, boy, is it a serious thing. Oh, yeah. It's the poskim of the major agencies that come together. And I remember convening the Bezdin on this, because this was so far-reaching. This would change the bars at all the weddings, because this guy owns so many products. Mm-hmm. And they came to the maskana that, yes, chometz of haPesach is so serious in the eyes of Chazal that even though it's just officially was said for the Gavra, but it is on the Chesed, and I have to tell everybody. So Rabbi Yisrael, can you imagine the call I had to make to this factory? Yeah, I just want to follow up on your request to be kosher. Not only can you not be kosher, but I'm about to tell the world that your entire factory can't be used for kosher problems. Boy, did that not go well, okay? Mm-hmm. You can imagine. You know, sometimes the Rabbanu Shalom shows that when you do the right thing, it works out. You know, that's for sure a fact. We don't always see it all the time, right? This is one of those times that I don't remember how much long afterwards, the company called us back and said, you know what? We're so impressed with the authenticity. It was such an uncomfortable thing that you did. And it could have had legal ramifications, their ramification, and you just stuck to the Jewish law.
Wow.
And he said, what can we do to start making kosher products? Now listen to what happened, because this really will shed light on the entire chometz of haPesach. I said, well, you know, generally, when you have a company that's Jewish-owned, we sell the chometz, okay? He says, tell me how that works. So you come in, you sign a document for 7 days, you sell it over. And he says, and then at the end, he says, well, the guy buys it back, you know. He looks at me, he says, well, according to federal law, every time I sell chometz, every time I sell liquor, and I buy liquor, if it's a real sale, I got to pay a tax on the beginning and at the end. Wow. So, okay, so that's going to cost me every Passover $300 million in taxes. Real? Yeah.
Because if it's a bona fide sale.
If it's a bona fide sale. I said, well, I start throwing in some ciphers, religious sale. Listen to this word. Rabbi, is this a real sale or not?
Wow.
Of course it's a real sale. How could I do it? What a great reminder. And that, by the way, let me tell you, so the end of the story was, he says, you know what we're going to do? Every year we're going to put away 100 barrels, and we're going to do a real mechira, and the guy's going to own it all the way until bottling, and we're going to mark off the bottle that these barrels can't be touched. Mm-hmm. And in 10 years from now, you're going to have authentically kosher, whatever, bourbon, or, you know, you could do a lot of stuff with it. Mm-hmm. That's what happened, and that's what we've been doing. As a matter of fact, last week, I went to this factory. And
did he have to pay tax on that? I mean,
no. I mean, remember, it was a different type of sale. It wasn't like you know, they weren't selling the bottles. It wasn't the company. It was a different type of sale, and it was all in house at this point. Uh-huh. But I want to bring out of that point is his question to us really sheds light onto the whole chometz of haPesach, because most of the sales out there are indeed this type of thing. You know, sign here and we'll see you in 8 days, right? Now, that could be legitimate if it's done right. But the problem is if the factories or the distributors or the beer companies stay open on Pesach, continue to do business as if that little signing did nothing to them. Mm-hmm. It's somewhat of a chuchatzui, it's somewhat of a harama. Right. And people, they want to stay away from that. They take this very seriously. So part of the research into where you can and cannot go after Pesach is to find out what type of mechira. There's 3 different methods of mechiras that we know about. So it's a big part of understanding what type of mechira is done. Kudos to the OK. where they recently, got into one of the big beer distributors in New York State area, the tri-state, and they actually convinced them to do it right, sell it right. The CEO should take a vacation, which shows that he doesn't have buy lists. We're always looking for no buy lists. And now, Baruch Hashem, because of that, the beer in the tri-state, he's one of the major distributors, has been taken care of. But there's a lot more that goes on that's part of what we're doing when we look into chometz of Pesach.
So practically speaking, where am I going shopping?
Where are you going shopping? So I could tell you, because we don't have this year's list out, and I have in front of me last year's list.
Okay.
That's divided into several, the non-Jewish involvement at all, like the Aldis of the world and the CVS's and the Sam's Clubs and Wegmans and whatnot. And then we have the next category is the ones that are publicly traded companies of non-Jewish owner, but some of the distributors are, and we have, again, this is last year's information. So Target actually had the frozen section was in one category, and the non-frozen was another, because it's two different distributors.
So the first lesson is don't extrapolate from one year to another.
100%.
Just because you were able to buy from Target last year doesn't mean you could buy from Target this year. Just because you were able to buy from the Target frozen section doesn't mean that you could buy from the produce.
And especially this year, where the disruption of COVID is still, and the supply chain. The scrambling for product has changed everything. So great point. Don't rely. But the answer to your question, obviously, is like they say in Israel, yasha yasha v'sham tisha, right? So contact us after Pesach, or maybe
now, people want to get the ACO
updated
list.
God
it's going to
willing,
be distributed,
Hashem,
right?
I'll be able to email it to as many people that contact us, and be able to. And really, the truth is, these things are written primarily for the rabbanim of shul, so they can give it over to their mispalim. And that's really what we're going to be focusing on. So I would say that go to your Rav. That might be the smartest thing. Go to your Rav. And your Rav will come to the kashrus professional and say, what do you know about this year? He'll be able to get these documents, and he'll be able to help his 200, 300 mispalim, and this way it's a much easier chain of answers. So that's the answer.
Now, you had mentioned off camera something about bourbon, special bourbon with chometz of Pesach.
Right.
Why is there more of a concern with bourbon than, let's say, other whiskeys?
Good question. The answer is that bourbon is it's the country where bourbon is American made, right? So it happens to be that a large amount of Jewish hands, whether in the distribution or in the actual bottling or the storing, or behind the scenes where a bourbon company doesn't have the base alcohol, he'll buy it from the Jewish guy down the block and redo it. All of that, it's much more prevalent than maybe Scotch, which is not really a Jewish-owned industry out in Scotland, but it has to be in Scotland, or Irish whiskey and all of that. So bourbon does have more, as I said, Jewish involvement. And actually, the more you know, the less you drink, okay? And it's one of those things that, if we get an application for potato chips, you come in today, you watch them take the potato out of the ground, scrub it, slice it, fry it, make sure it's bishul yisrael if you're machmir, and the next day it's in a bag ready to snack in your car, right, and make a mess. But not with bourbon, these things are aged. So when you walk into a factory, you got to figure out, okay, what happened? You got to go back in time. One of the things us mashgichim, we have time machines. I don't know. You got to really recreate. Okay, what happened 8 years ago? Can I retroactively do this? So that's, but particularly with bourbon, it's which is really fascinating. It talks to where we've grown as far as the way we consume things. It used to be, and anyone Hasidish would appreciate this, bourbon was the safest mashke. There was 4 ingredients, nothing's changing. It's not as aged as much as maybe some of these scotches. Right. It was the safest ingredient. And it was the safest mashka, and that's the way it was. I have to tell you, it's exploded the industry. We've gotten more knowledge about the industry, and it's not as pashut anymore at all. Mm-hmm. And as I just said, it's also much harder to certify. So bourbon it could be a problem. You have to know your things. I remember when that story I told you where we found out something was a problem. Young man from Lakewood who, little did I realize that there's an industry of people buy barrels and they age it in their own basement.
Oh, really?
This guy bought several $100,000 of product in his basement from this Jewish-owned company that never sold their chometz. And boy, what an asylum to have. Do I pour it down the drain? Mm-hmm. Are you even allowed to give it? Can you give it away? These are real great shilas for a rav, mm-hmm. not so pashut. Mm-hmm. If you're allowed to give it, how far does the gzeira go?
Right. Now, one of the things that became very popular on Motzei Pesach, mm-hmm. especially among B'nai Torah, is to seek out non-Jewish establishments as opposed to buying from your local grocery store. People don't want to rely on the mechira. I'm not looking to be controversial at all. I'm asking a very practical question. If you were advising a mispal, if you were advising someone, what would you advise them to do? Should they go to their local Jewish grocery store, which ostensibly conducted a bona fide mechira? Should they go to their local ShopRite or Path Market if it's non-Jewish owned? Is that better? Is there a better mahalach? We're talking about right now Motzei Pesach, right, before a few days have passed.
So if it's bona fide and you really have researched it that it's not Jewish owned and there's no shilas, that's better if you don't want to rely on the mechira. But on the other hand, if it's mesupik and there's mesupik and you have the distributors, you're not sure.
We're not sure if product came on Pesach.
So you might as well go to a place that mamish halachli, a frumah that did it kahalacha, and the mamish did it the right way. That might be your better sense.
There's a mitzvah of zakta boy.
For sure, for sure.